original missiles. So, and after what happened on October 7th, and
Oh no!
basically
Oh God!
downplaying that and worrying that, and downplaying the fact that Hamas said they would do it again and again till they extirpate all the Jews from Israel. And then just take whatever Hamas says as gospel and just present it. I decided I didn't want to give money to them anymore. And we do have a new media landscape. We have, and if you want to get information about a earth, basically a flood coming or something like that, the best way to do it is text messaging. Everybody's got text messages. The phones have batteries in them, and we don't really require, radio the way we did before. And there's a lot more diversity on the internet than there'll ever be in broadcast media. Thank you.
Of course, there are areas that aren't getting text messages, including areas of Texas where people died because the cell service is substandard there. So you can't 100% rely on that. And by the way, in West Virginia, there's a huge area of West Virginia, and Steve will speak to this better than me, that is a no radio zone because there are these super secret listening stations there that the government is running. So there are no internet, there's no Wi-Fi service, there's no cell phone service. So there are areas of the nation where you have to rely on radio signals sometimes from afar because they can't in that area transmit to inform the public. I mean, on 9/11, Rudy Giuliani gathered all the radio reporters together and said, "Come with me," because he knew he needed to use radio to get out vital information to the public. So I would argue that radio does play a massive role beyond what text messaging can do for us in times of emergency.
Well, I would argue that we would be well off to take things like, like we did with the Universal Telephone Service, and work on plugging those holes up, which, and then basically making a medium, but not, saying what should go over it. And also satellite, like what Starlink is doing, having satellites that can reach every place in the world, regardless of what mountains might be there, because they're looking down. That might be, some combination of that might be a better solution that would kind of be a universal solution, just like we have a telephone that goes to people's houses. Except in this case, if we need to, we can broadcast things over these wires. And text messages don't have to be a big deal in terms of bandwidth.
Thank you, Les. So this, what I'm going to point out now, and there's some overlap because USAID provides some of the services I'm going to mention. But these are services not part of the USAID budget. That in addition to USAID, NPR, and PBS are being cut. Global health programs, $500 million. These are programs addressing infectious diseases, maternal and child health, and database prevention, disease prevention through vaccination. That's according to PBS. Humanitarian relief and refugee assistance, $800 million cut, providing shelter, clean water, sanitation, family reunification, and crisis relief for people who are displaced, economic development and democracy building programs. That's over $4 billion cut. Humanitarian food aid and disaster assistance, that's about $500 million, $496 million. And peacekeeping and stabilization efforts, that's funding to UN and multilateral peacekeeping missions. That's $361 million that's being cut. So to answer Hanson, it is not just NPR, PBS, and USAID. There are other agencies that are being defunded as well.
All right. Hello. Thank you. I'm just going to focus on NPR and PBS. Part of the discussion I was really interested in. So I'll say this: I'm 35. The last time I listened to anything from NPR, even went to a website to read anything, was like 10 years ago. Right? So that's the last time I've ever touched it. I'm an independent, by the way, so just so people know. And the last time, PBS, News Hour, that's about it. Right? On occasion, I'll go on the YouTube channel. Actually, that's where I would go to the YouTube channel and see I forget who I forget who the guy is that's with Shields on Friday now, but that'll be on occasion, I'll check that out to see what they have to say on something. But other than that, as a millennial, right, these outlets, don't play any significant importance into my life. But I do it. But I'll tell you this. The last time I listened to NPR, I was listening to this podcast that I used to subscribe to for them called Hidden Brain. And they did an episode where they were supposed to be talking, so first they did an episode, this is like way back then, and I thought they did a great episode trying to bridge the gap between people on the Israel-Palestine side, which was very, unbiased. It was very they were giving both sides a voice. I thought that's pretty decent. And then sometime later, I would hear a podcast where they were talking about biases. Particular biases in America, and they were talking about, and they went into politics. And so the host of it gave what he would say would be like a Republican or a conservative bias. And then I was waiting for him to give me, well, where was the liberal bias? He never did, right? He just jumped onto a whole completely different topic. And it was at that point, I was like, I've always felt that NPR was trying not to say that it was liberal, but it is pretty liberal. Not that that's a problem, but I wish it would just be open about it, right? And I was like, but I was like, okay, I'm pretty much done with this particular platform, right? It's not really of interest to me. And I used to listen to some other things on NPR radio and stuff like that. I feel like you're not really saying what you really feel, and you're trying to straddle this. You're saying it, but you're not necessarily saying it. Like, I know what you really feel, but you're not doing a good job of trying to be down the middle of the line, but you're trying your best, right? But more to the bigger point, I think, with the last speaker, I think that we should be investing in the infrastructure, and if we were going to do any subsidizing, right, we should subsidize that so that people in rural areas and the most extremely poor people who wouldn't have access to these things can have access to great internet, great cell service and those things. Because I agree with him in this regard, is that look. Like I said, I was looking up the numbers, and it's about 5.1% not millennial, but Gen Z. Even looking at listening to NPR or reading anything on it, and millennials, this is somewhere between 7% to maybe 18%, right? I just am looking at it. I think we've all kind of largely moved on, and I know that the big contention is often, what do you do with the people who are very poor? What do you do with the people, obviously, who live in rural areas too, who don't have access to things? And I just think investing in infrastructure, by the way, for the conservative people out there on your side, there's your job. There's your job, even for some of the liberal people. There's your job creation for a temporary time period. Building infrastructure, there you go. You put some people to work doing that. But I'm fine with there being airwaves or a network system that everybody can access for free. If they don't have the money to afford anything else, to do that, and then they can choose what kind of media outlets, what kind of things they want to listen to. And I know, look, I live in an urban area, so I'm not in a rural area, but I go to the weather channel, right? I got the weather app on my phone, right? That's That's how I'm getting information about everything that's going on, what's happening in the weather. And when you tend to look at the audience for NPR and the audience for like PBS, outside of just some of the kids programming, right? When you look at it, it's the truth for broadcast television and cable. The people are like over 60. Right? That's a larger age. So the older you are, more likely you are to have an affinity to it, I would argue, although with the exception of some people on the stage probably don't, affinity toward these. And the younger you are and the more technologically savvy you are, the less likely you are to have an affinity to them. I think the two should go, but I think this should be phased out over a period of time. And in between that, before it's phased out, those two outlets, you need to work on building infrastructure in order to service the needs of other people. So that, I would say it would be a phase-out system. Maybe it's a 10-year, 15-year phase-out system where you're actually engaging in putting money toward building the infrastructure to eliminate those and then allowing people to choose whatever media sources and outlets they want. That would be the way I would do it. That would be the proper way I think that you can engage in that. But I'm done.
So David, I know that you said you haven't listened to NPR for 10 years, and you used as an example podcasting that you heard that was generated by either NPR or an NPR station. Those podcasts are not funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and so therefore these cuts would have no impact on them. They are funded solely through listener donations and corporate sponsorships. So that would not apply. So if you heard a bias in a podcast, which may be reflective or may not be reflective of a bias on the airwaves, rest assured that your tax dollars did not pay for that bias. Jane.
Hey Gary, thanks. Well, I'm glad that first you have not the question from one's personal experience is sometimes illustrative, so I will take that same liberty. By the way, quick hello, shout out to future Congressman John Katover, a couple of anons listening, you've got quite a audience. This is what I wanted to share. Again, it's like only in a critical thinking form might this be allowed. So take like one step back, zoom out, pick your metaphor for observing what's going on in the United States. And the amount of really, I think what I certainly consider hateful, venomous, shitting on people because of what language they. These are not new American behaviors, patterns. This type of asshole has been in our midst since forever. And we can slice that through gender, race, all the lenses. I don't find it that valuable to do it anymore because it's just there. And I think, I guess the dam is broke. This is my broke. It's my view on it. But
And how does that relate to this defunding?
Yeah, I'm getting there right now. The defunding is inevitable. It's a natural outgrowth of that ethos that I was just talking about. So I think, no, it shouldn't. If you are a country, I mean, they should not be defunded, whether it's 400 million and whatever percent that is of some, weird math, game people like to play. It's really not the point about the number, Gary. It's that many Americans clearly don't give a fuck about the collective well-being of the country. And they want to dismantle the things that are for the quote-unquote public. So I think it's terrible, but I think it's inevitable. And my personal connection to this is just on the library in our town. And we're starting the new, I'm sure you've been a part of these, it's not fun, strategy for the next 5 years. Okay, Gary, it's about $1.5 million. It's a small upstate New York, very poor county. I raised the question just as a way to get our juices flowing to the subcommittee, looking at the next 5 years. What should we be thinking about? And I said, well, what if all funding for public libraries goes away? This was last week. So this is just real. And yeah, two of the people laughed in my face, and one guy said, "Wow, Jane, that's a little apocalyptic." I'm like, I know, but isn't that where we're at? Like, and so just today I'm writing an email going, yeah, I admit it. I'm being a bit doomsday in this consideration, but I think we're being delinquent in our responsibility. Yes, the eye roll, right? Because the public library with a librarian there who, of course, has homeless people coming in there, has had to hire security because the town can't handle the poverty problem in the area. So the public needs are becoming more and more of an abstraction. Sadly, most Americans. So I think we should all prepare for this.
Chief Agent to the Commission of National Security.
And then really gutting of the good things that most of us were. Who would argue with Sesame Street? It's good for kids.
It's all mine.
It's this weird takeover of the American, the percentage of American
I must
people
apologize for my tardiness. 'Twas next to
their noses to
impossible.
the sand. Stay home. They don't understand that this is a dismantling
No one wants to do the driving.
Well, that's a much broader question, but it is applicable to our discussion today. So, why do we need public libraries? We don't need public broadcasting any longer. Well, why do we need public libraries? Everything's available online. And if you're in a rural area that doesn't have internet service, well, let's start with the internet service. You can find almost anything you want online, and it's far more cost effective to read a book online than to have to publish the book. And you're saving trees in the process. So what the hell? Why do we want to have public libraries? But instead, we have Dan Bond touring Alcatraz today because they want to repurpose or past purpose, or whatever the word would be, Alcatraz as no longer a national treasure, a museum in the National Park System that is generating income to a cost-draining, to incarcerate people, that costs a lot of money. And so that's the direction we're going in, because incarcerating 2 million people in the United States apparently doesn't make us any safer. We need to incarcerate more people. So we're doing something wrong here. And I'm getting ready to move to a country where they don't have to incarcerate as many people as we have to in the United States. Okay, I allow you to allow me to get off topic, but I think it is all kind of interrelated. $500 million from our budget for public broadcasting is targeted. Somebody's stuck on the air. It's David Cheat again. I'll mute you. So that's saving the people money. We're saving money, but shutting down the beautiful, what it is now, beautiful museum. I've been there. It's a great tour. Go take it while you can of Alcatraz, because we need more places to incarcerate more people, and that's our new priority. Now, look, you could argue, as people do, that public broadcasting is biased. Of course, those same people will argue that non-public broadcasting is biased as well. But okay, maybe the bias is in the broadcasting, maybe it's in the observer of the broadcasting, maybe it's a combination of both, but this is a priority. All right, at least acknowledge that it's not because of fiscal savings. $500 million, really? Less than $500 million. Is that really your motivation, or is your motivation philosophical? And then acknowledge that it's philosophical. And I appreciate people who do, even if I may or may not agree with them. I appreciate that argument. But to argue that we're making all these changes to save money, when actually what we're doing is we're shifting money from, look how much money they've budgeted for ICE this year as compared to previous years, far more than is being funded for the FBI. Because right now it's in the public's mind that, we've been invaded, we have to put money into ICE, we have to have them running around in the way that they do, there's justification for the way they're doing it, all that kind of stuff. Jane is right. The reality is that there is a shift right now in priorities in this country. And I think the liberals need to wake up and realize that that's exactly what's happening. And I think that's your point, Jane, correct?
Absolutely, Gary. Thanks for making it more succinct.
Well, I don't think I've made it succinctly. I kind of rambled
You're
on.
building, as they say. Yeah, no, it's staggering to imagine.
Yeah.
I was going to be more dramatic and say, I think this is like a 21st century crystal meth, and we should take it as a fucking warning. Not just about Jews, Gary, just generally
Right.
about
All
what's
right, I
going
get your
on.
point. I get your point. Steve, thank you.
Yeah, well, as far as serving the rural community, I happen to live in one, and I can tell you hardly anyone that if you'd bring these entities up, they'd think anything about ever listening to them ever. I do think they lean left. I've listened to them off and on for 30 years. I think I kind of got a flavor of them. That's not the issue, though. For me, I mean, all news coverage to me has a variation of slants on it, so it's not what they're doing. I get my internet feed. We have a network of radio stations across the state that pretty well services everyone in the state. They do the things that you articulated earlier. It's called WB Metro News, and they're fairly good at it. So I think with the NPR and PBS, I think it's just time that they face the marketplace. If your product's good and it can survive the marketplace, great. If you're putting out a bad product and it can't survive the marketplace, well, then your mission statement was wrong. And to me, it's just that simple. I mean, I think it's, at one time, I believe that you're correct in how you framed the need for it. At one time, I believe that was probably correct, but I forget who said before, but we have a multitude of different media sources, that people can draw on anymore. So I think it's time that, they either produce a product that's going to survive the marketplace or not. Moving on to USAID, I think USAID, with what Doge uncovered that they was involved in, kind of sunk their own ship. I mean, some of the programs that was exposed, I think they lost credibility to what they was trying to do. Now, in the mix of that, was there good things? Probably was. But I think they took a huge credibility hit. And as far as, I was reading about some food, I think in Dubai, that they was talking about that was going to have to be burned biscuits or something. Well, and the way it was kind of initially framed, it's like this just happened. No, that stuff's been sitting there for years, not moving. Stuff. If that's the way you're handling food and that's the way you're handling these programs, then it tells me you don't really have a handle on who would send out that kind of food without having the objective about what it was going to do or who it was going to service. So I don't think there's a complete retraction from everything USAID does, but I think it's a program that got out of control. I think it served a lot of purposes it was never intended to serve. And I think there needs to be a top-down scrutiny on the whole operation to make sure, like Rubio said, and I think he's completely correct, we need to make sure that this money that we send to whoever is doing things that strategically is in our interest. And if it's not, we should cut it off. And I think it's just really that simple.
He may be 100% correct about that. I will just point out in my conversations with people in third world nations that the Chinese Communist Party is doing the best that it can to make inroads and win the hearts and minds of people in those nations through their humanitarian outreach, which I don't see as humanitarian at all. I see it as strategic and see that it is an interest that's counter to the interests of the United States. Now, it could be that that means nothing and that it is a waste of their money, as you suggest much of USAID might be.
Do not let them increase your home insurance rates.
This is something
I used to feel powerless watching my premiums rise every year. They count on you not looking for
strategy
better
of this nation for decades now. Maybe it's a bad strategy, and it's worthy of reevaluating. Thank you, Steve.
Gary, I just want to raise like a question here about or a point about. The question is if it can't compete, like it should just go away. I mean, the danger is the market can't do everything, right? And sometimes with things that, like, services that, for instance, the killing of local newspapers.
How about bus service? Bus service, I would guarantee you that bus service in Philadelphia, if it's anything like bus service in New York City, it's a big-time losing proposition. Exacerbated because it's built in to be a losing proposition, but exacerbated by fare evaders. And what's the poor bus driver going to do? Get stabbed because he demands or she demands that the person pay, and I have to ride on that same bus, and I pay. Well, why should they not pay? Well, because I'm now subsidizing them because they just either can't afford to, or in many cases, because it's so heavily subsidized, the fares are relatively low. It's not that they can't afford it, it's just that they know that they can get away with it, so they do. I've seen people get on the train and not pay and get off at Newark Liberty International Airport to take a flight. Well, if they can afford the airline ticket, they certainly can afford the few dollars to take the train, the public transportation train, to the airport. They do it because they can, not because they cannot afford.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there are certain things that everything, like there are certain things we subsidize, right? Libraries are going to get it, right? I mean, the free market's not going to do that, right? It's just not, right? It's not going to replace public libraries, which are, I use my library all the time. So I just think that, now again, we could debate whether or not NPR is one of those goods, right? But to just say everything should compete in the marketplace the same way, I think it's a sort of crass and flat understanding of the market.
Well,
Go ahead, sir.
that's not. Yeah, I mean that wasn't my point at all. My point was this: is to Scott's point, there are situations, and he pointed to the library, which I think is 100% accurate, that would be an example of a non-competing marketplace entity. But to his point, we have a saturation of media. It's not like if we lose these entities that we're going to have a media blackout. So you have a saturation of competition.
When they're for profit, they're very different, right? I think it's a different animal when it's a for profit thing. It's advantage by being nichier and that stuff. I think something in the public trust, which public radio is by nature, served a different end.
But my point, Scott, is that you're talking about content and articulation of the certain sections of media. And my point is we have such a stratification of media in such quantity anymore that you can pretty well get anything you want. So it's not like there's a niche out there that can't be filled, that NPR or PBS is going to fill. So that's kind of what I've been alluding to.
What WHY like to do. Nobody is going to do what my local NPR is. I listen to it every morning. Nobody is going to do this sort of combination of local and national content served all in one thing. No one's going to do that. There's just, I don't know who could staff something like WHY. We have one of the top public radio stations in the country. Nobody could do what HY does. No, again, they won't close without better funding. Most of their funding is from donors, places. But they do something that would not easily be replicated. just the staffing alone. I mean, it's just, I don't think you could.
I think there's a danger in saying, well, if their model is not effective, then they should close up shop and not expect the public to pay for it. And that is an argument that one can make. But I will point out that in Washington, D.C., where people have the choice of 3 public radio stations, so that kind of, if I'm a public radio station aficionado, I could be listening to any of those 3 stations. The programming is not identical, but it could be similar at times. The top listened to station among all age listeners in Washington, D.C. is WAMU. That's a public NPR affiliated radio station. Now, WTOP is the strongest commercial radio station in Washington, D.C., and they've got terrific billings, so they are financially more secure than AMU, which cannot air commercials. But to suggest that the station, because it's public and because it's public, is not able to generate the kind of finances that the commercial radio station can, is an indication that that station is not serving the public. Well, at least in this snapshot that I gave, the example that I gave, that's not the case. The station is super serving the public. It's just that the funding model is different. And so I don't know, Steve, whether it's a fair comparison. I think it's more apples and oranges there. Look, if nobody's listening to the public radio station, and you suggest that in rural West Virginia people are not particularly enamored with their public radio station, then perhaps that public radio station, for whatever multitude of reasons, is not properly servicing the community. And if they lose the funding and they go away, nobody's even going to notice. I get that, but that's not necessarily the case in other.
Yeah, no, it isn't that, Gary. I think that the majority of the people has moved on to different media sources. I've listened to the local NPR. It's very similar to what I've heard in other states, and even states where I listen to it out in metro areas, large metro areas. Very similar content. I think the point is that people are consuming different types of media, and that the traditional NPR type model is not being heavily consumed as a rule. Maybe in DC, where it has a niche market, that could be true. But I think a lot of people anymore just get on their phones or they click on the radio going down the road, and I think that's become the consumer habit. I don't think it's something that, is like we just don't want to listen to NPR. I think it's just a decision that's being made by media consumption in general.
Into that's 100% true. Double. And by the way, we're now at 5:58. A lot of people on the stage. We will not be adding anybody to the stage. I'm going to try to get through everybody as quickly as possible so everyone gets a chance to speak.
Gary, can you hear me okay? I can try to adjust my connection if there's a problem.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
That's great. Look, I have some personal connection, I guess, or in the sense that I've listened to NPR quite a lot. I listened to it in the late 90s in various cities. I listened to, and definitely into the 2000s. I remember having a conversation with my uncle, who was this, self-described libertarian who wants very small government and stuff. And I was like, yeah, but, look, to me, it was almost a justification of the government itself that we had things like NPR and PBS, like public broadcast. You had the BBC, you had the CBC. To me, just based purely on the credibility and the quality of what they were putting out, I was like, yeah, we need more public institutions like this. Yes, tax me and spend it on this sort of thing. That was my attitude up through I would say the early 2010s.
at that time, I took a break from all this stuff. I left the country. Although I will say, I don't know how much public money they have, but another public station that's more listener supported or some sponsorship, KEXP in Seattle. It's just music. It's just always good music. They have live bands all the time. It's like there's nothing compared. I would just donate my entire life savings to KEXP to save it. By the way, but I think that's kind of leads into my next point is these are already primarily. I think NPR is 99% listener supported or corporate whatever or donor supported. Let's say, PBS I think is 85% supported by sponsors government from PBS. I haven't been able, I did watch some of the programming in the 80s. I liked some of the documentaries in the 90s, and anytime but let me just say, when I've checked in to news-related content or other kind of content in the last, it's declined. There's still some good stuff that PBS does occasionally, but it's really been tainted by a certain ideology. You could call it, there's been not a full institutional capture. I mean, it's not as bad as if you go in some of the other clubhouse rooms, for instance, and listen to some of the things just direct teachings from what you might call grievance studies departments in universities. But it's definitely been heavily tainted with this. Someone mentioned earlier, that hate has there's always been this negative stuff towards different people, but it's more now. It's like, oh, what is the progressively safe or mandated, even I would say religiously mandated form of hatred, and and I think that is what has been pushed heavily. Not super heavily, but they may couch it a bit. They might hedge their reporting a bit, but it's very clear from the types of reportings, from the Russell conjugations they use, from all this stuff that certain people that might be close to the majority of the country are need to be in various ways discredited, humiliated, all these things. And these are predominantly the taxpayers who are supporting this stuff. So I think, to me, they've lost a lot of credibility just purely in how they've been operated, who's been, who the board members are, who the hires are. If you looked at the testimony, I think it was the head of NPR, the lady who did that, so the political witch hunt led by Marjorie Taylor Greene or something, but her answers were terrible. I mean, it really is like, no, I don't want Marjorie Taylor Greene, as ugly a human being as she is in every possible way, I think, frankly, won that argument. And it's like, yeah, I don't want my tax dollars going to, if this is how they're running their ship and they're not course correcting in a significant enough way, and they're not admitting that they made, I think they did actually admit they made some mistakes, like Hunter Laptop. I think they actually admitted, since every bit of evidence now, they can't deny it anymore. They said, oh yeah, we should have actually reported that. But, I don't know. I think, Gary, if to the extent this stuff is valuable, people like me will pick up the slack and hopefully do more to support it. And yeah, if far leftist people who hate people like me want to pay for that, fine. But yeah, I'd say I'm going into a tunnel, so I might lose connection. But I would just say,
Yeah, I think we have lost you, Double. Thank you. I'll just point out that there are people on the left who think that NPR is leaning too far to the right sometimes because they made a concerted decision on this No King's Day where there were these massive demonstrations across the nation. Certainly something significant that ought to have been covered in my mind. they made a decision at the highest level of the news division of NPR to not cover those. Maybe it's because they were afraid of criticism, such as the criticism that Doge has leveled toward them. And so they may be a little gun-shy covering things that they ought to cover for fear that they're covering it because they are supporters of the demonstration, not because it's newsworthy. Ragged.
Yeah, my comments are going to be mostly to USAID. Quickly, I guess, as far as I'm concerned, NPR and PBS, these things can be cut, not only necessary in the current information environment, but USAID is an organization that I've worked with before. It's my background. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Marine Corps. I was involved in the 2001 Afghanistan takedown of Taliban. I was involved in the restoration of governance and disaster operations in Haiti in 2004. 2004 to 2006, I was in Iraq, Fallujah, Iraq, in the battle and the reconstitution of the city, and disaster response operations in the Philippines. And I would say that I've also been a professor at the University of the Marine Corps University Expeditionary Warfare School, and a student of the Joint Forces Staff College, and conducted many war games. And what happens when you conduct war games on just about any foreign affairs problem, from full spectrum combat to military operations other than war, is that the solutions that result from wargaming is always to engage all elements of national power across what they call the dime: diplomatic, information, military, economic spheres of influence. And to cut something like USAID, now, I've been extremely critical of USAID in the past. I told Condoleezza Rice herself in Fallujah that USAID was useless in that regard, in that environment, and we needed an arm of the government to do what they were supposed to be doing. So reform the thing, but don't cut it out entirely. That's insane. All you do is put more on the backs of the soldiers and Marines who have to carry the load during those operations. And you can erect any barrier you want. You can deport as many people as you want. You can erect terrorists all you want, but you cannot shut out the world. We are integrated. It's a global environment, and there's no way we're going to be able to avoid foreign entanglements as large as we are. As much as we're connected to the outside world, and the more, what you find in every one of these situations is you want to have a carrot and a stick, and the more you cut your ability to influence events on the carrot side of the equation, the more you have to rely on the stick. So reform I think they're also cutting Voice of America. The information arm of the United States government. These things seem a little bit crazy to me. And the bang for the buck that you get for these is a very small amount of the federal budget. So, the idea that we're going to save, save the national debt from these things, really, if you don't cut the defense, Social Security, or Medicare, you're not really doing anything for the national budget. But this minor, almost footnote on the national budget actually produces a lot of, it allows for the propagation of information in those environments, and you can influence events with if USAID is properly executed. So reform the thing, put another leader in there, don't cut it. That's insane, and it puts more in the backs of the soldiers and Marines who have to carry the load.
And I presume that when you do those war games to which you refer, part of the equation is, because they're all what ifs, right? So what if you need to have support from the populace when you are engaged in a foreign country. And so I think part of this is winning the hearts and minds of the people. And I think the problem is that the void that will be established will be quickly filled by the CCP. And I think, you know, when push comes to shove, when we have to in the future deploy soldiers and Marines, that that gives them the kind of leg up that they really ought to have. Is that a fair assessment, or am I, as a civilian never having served, way off base?
No, exactly what I was talking about with Secretary Rice. One of the problems we had was we had little to no employment opportunities in Fallujah. We were trying to restart the economy, so the insurgency was able to just grab a young man off the street. They would throw him on the street corners, and they'd pay him $50 to plant an IED. Once we got the glass factory and the cement factory going, they had a lot fewer people, young men who were willing to do that because they could make money for their family without having to risk their lives. So, by engaging the economic side of the equation, we lessened their ability to put soldiers in their cause. So that we did that ourselves without help from USAID. My point to her was, she asked me, well, we had four lines of influence: training security forces, conducting security operations, developing local governance, and kickstarting the local economy. As my boss at the time, Colonel Berger, who became General Berger, the previous commandant of the Marine Corps, he looked at security operations and training security forces, pointed to his U.S. Marines tag on his uniform. So this is in our wheelhouse. But I've got guys out here trying to kickstart a government and economics, an economy that we're kind of coming up with that on the fly. It'd be nice if we actually had. And he asked us what we needed. I said, well, it'd be nice if we had a United States Agency for International Development, which of course she said, what we do. I said, well, I know we have one titled that, but they don't seem to be doing any of it. So I'm for the concept, reforming the organization and actually energizing it to do what its mission statement is, and not gutting it.
So what you just described in Afghanistan is exactly the the business model used by drug dealers in our inner cities. If the kids can't get jobs, drive around in flashy cars, show them what they could have if they come work for you, and pay them to sell the drugs on the street corner and possibly take the hit. And if you give them a real job or an opportunity for a real job, then maybe they focus their futures on a future, which, that's a dead end on the street corner. So it's exactly the same business model. Thank you, Ragged. Thanks for your service. And thank you as well for your occasional contributions here. People do listen when you speak. Edelman.
Hey, and Ragged, I thought did a good job of bringing up one of the points that I wanted to make with, it's an investment. But I wanted to look at the big picture. I mean, but it's not just the cost of the thing, it's bottom line. So like with military, you couldn't have a net gain. So philosophically, I think, is the bigger picture, the harder thing to address. And then, you look at things, for example, private sector versus public sector. We have medical research. Where are the drugs? There's some drugs that we don't have. It's not profitable to make them. So there's a lot of these things that could make quality of life better for everyone, I bet, if it was feasible to do the many years of research and everything. So sometimes, there's definitely a place for this public sector. And I'm big on that because potentially that's where you could really, all hands on deck. You could really get things done, potentially. But then there's this side of what I call the bureaucratic side of it. How are things done? Sometimes they're not done good. So there's that too. So let's do the philosophy. So people, there's two problems. We got on the public side, we have the bureaucratic mushiness of the lack of effectiveness. and on the marketplace side, we have a more corrupt, condensed wealth marketplace than ever. So that's a problem, because if the marketplace is messed up in that way, things might not happen right either. So, for example, advertisers that do it, they're only going to be owned by certain, more bias or whatever. So there's issues with both. But anyways, I think philosophically, people have, that's where you have the differences. Your underlying assumptions, public versus private, and what's understood there, the pluses and minuses. I think a lot of people are kind of ignorant there. How does it work as an investment? People might not see the investment at all. People might not see the skewer and the condensation and the problems of the marketplace at all. So to make that kind of judgment, that's what needs to be done. Their underlying assumptions. That's why we have such big opinions. Now on the low-hanging fruit, the really easy stuff, yeah, there was very biased against Israel. It's like what wasn't said, and how I think and I learned a lesson from that. I thought bias was more simple. That you say good stuff about something and you're saying bad stuff about something else. No, that's kindergarten bias. Bias is a little harder to see. It's kind of what doesn't said is who you interview. It's words you use. For example, I could use the words Gaza refugees. Or other people say Palestinian. What's a Palestinian? I don't know what that is. I say a Gaza refugee.
Better example is terrorist versus militant. The people who attacked us on 9/11, terrorists. The people who attacked Israel on October the 7th, militants. What?
Exactly.
But that's getting us a little off topic. But it is my issue as well as yours.
Yeah, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the low-hanging fruit. But I just wanted to mention, a lot of people here may not realize they might not see bias, because sometimes it's just how you use words. But anyways, there's tons of bias there. I'm an independent, by the way, Gen Xer, and we have radios and we have a radio collector in this house and a ham radio guy, and I think philosophically, CQ. Yes, I think philosophically, I hate NPR in many ways, and it's so annoying to me with everything. They start with a beautiful topic like a drug development. Oh my God, yay, finally they're going to talk about some drug development. I'm all ears. And then it turns into all about some kind of racial lens. Like, wait, what? I was all set up to hear something scientific and interesting, and it turned into equitable racial thing. I hate that. It's so annoying. But even though I'm very annoyed with them, and they weren't like that 5 years ago so much, very little. This is only the last five years they went down the toilet with that. But anyways, I still want them to be, I'd want them to be funded, because you don't have anything like that in the private. It's not feasible. And I'm sure they make money somehow. If more investment and they need to have certain program that brings them in some more money or something, I'm sure that can be done. If budgets are tight, I bet they can respond to that. But because I think the decision needs to be made more on a deeper philosophical level, as if anything more so than the annoying low-hanging fruit. That's all. Thanks.
Copy that 5x5. Steven.
Hey, how's it going? My number one thing with USAID is a lot of people seem to not understand or not get that all that food that's being produced for USAID is being produced in the United States of America and is funding our farmers, and has been for a good long while. So as far as USAID and food production, feeding the people, vaccinating people around the world, it is nothing to do but with, number one, how can we, as the strongest country in the world, quote unquote, sit there and watch millions of people die? Not okay with me. As far as public broadcast systems go, you know, I've watched. I still listen to KNPR, and I still watch freaking the PBS. I watch freaking Antiques Roadshow, my favorite show in the world. Sorry, yeah, I'm a Gen Xer, but I love old shit. And it's a great source of education, not only for adults, but children. And I do have a 6-year-old son who has grown up on PBS. So just as I grew up on PBS, and just as so many people on this stage grew up on PBS. And if you have any questions about PBS, go watch Mr. Rogers addressing Congress about PBS. If you have any questions, by far one of the greatest men that have ever freaking graced the television screen and brought so much to the world. Period. And I don't care what part of the world you're in, because Mr. Rogers was translated into many, many, many different languages, as well as Sesame Street. It gives our kids the fundamentals. I watched it happen. Yes, there are programs on the computer and all this other stuff that are available, but nothing as accessible. And lowering access to any kind of education is just, again, goes against our stance as the greatest nation in the world. I don't think any great nation would be limiting access to education of any form. As far as the biases in media go, I think we are all old enough to remember in Ronald Reagan's administration, him and his bills making it to where news agencies didn't have to give equal time to both sides of the story. That used to be demanded. It used to be a
That was Clinton. That was the equal access was died in the Clinton administration, not in the Reagan.
Well, it started in the Reagan administration. It might have taken its final nail in the coffin in the Clinton administration, but nonetheless, we can go through the history books and we can go through the documents and we prove.
Well, I lived it. I lived it.
I lived that too.
I lived it in the industry, Stephen. So
Well, that's I can appreciate that, but all I'm saying is. Needless to say, who did it? It was a wrong thing to do. Don't care. And I like Reagan as a president. You know, just like every president, there's some things I don't like about Reagan, and there's some things I do. Just about like Clinton, there's some things I liked about Clinton. There's some things I did not. But here nor there, we need to really wrap our heads around why the media and quote unquote news outlets have become so one-sided or the other, and to reinitiate some of these ideals that we want as Americans, equal freaking opinion.
Okay, we're expanding the conversation. There are a lot
Sorry,
of
I'll get back.
But I will say it's a beautiful day in Stephen's neighborhood, I'm sure. Thank you, Stephen.
Hey, Garrett, can you hear me?
Yep.
I can't say much for NPR. I've tried to check it out a couple of times. Maybe I listened at the wrong time, or can't find the right show. So I'm pretty neutral on that. With regards to PBS, though, I don't think that people understand how PBS functions as an entity, right? So it's like PBS because a buddy of mine produces shows for PBS, right? And so PBS is not like Fox or CNN where, every PBS station is running the same programming regardless of where you are in the country. It's really like almost like member stations in a sense. So
they are member stations.
Yeah, and it's a lot of these member stations do their own programming, right? So it's like I could be watching Channel 13, which is PBS here in New York, and you could be watching
Channel
PBS
56 in Detroit.
Yeah, there you go. And we, at the same time, and we're watching two completely different.
Exactly. Sometimes it'll be the same, but sometimes it
Might be the same if, so my buddy who did a show.
The PBS NewsHour, I would imagine, they all have. They're all carrying it. Frontline, they're all carrying it, but they're not all necessarily carrying everything that is offered by the network. That's correct. And the same goes for NP.
I didn't know that. So, some of this is sponsored. I don't think the cutting of the funding for PBS in general will shut down PBS, because there are a lot of corporations that really do give a lot of money to PBS through grants and endowments. I think it will hurt them, but I think it won't like crush PBS per se. My thing is more so, I was a latchkey kid here in New York City. I grew up watching PBS, like to the previous speaker caller who talked about shows like, Mr. Rogers, and you yourself, you talked about Sesame Street and the Electric Company, all these other, Zoom. I don't understand the issue with, okay, you don't want to watch some woman making vegan recipes on PBS at 8 o'clock at night. Okay, whatever, right? But to think that PBS does not have a mission statement that values education for young kids, I don't understand what PBS you see as opposed to PBS in general with regards to the efforts that they make to, educate young people. I think at one point...
I think Darren and I are moving along just because of the time. I want to get to everybody before I have to, my drop dead moment, get out the door. But I think today, as people pointed out, things are different. Latchkey kids don't need PBS anymore. They have the internet, so instead of watching Big Bird, they could be watching porn. Yes, that was an editorial comment. Sarcasm, etc., etc., etc. I have to explain myself because sometimes people don't find me as humorous as I find myself.
Again, let's just admit this, okay? For those that think the free market and the internet is always better, we have to admit the quality of production of porn has gone down because of the internet. I mean, you used to get stories.
Okay, all right.
It's really, really hurt. If that's the measure. Well,
Oh my God. David, please save me.
Okay, I'll try. I'm gonna jump head in here. These are real disconcerting developments in my opinion, just because of the legacy of what it is they're gutting and cutting, and the benefit the nation's derived, irrespective of the ideological side you're on. But with regard to the internet being the source of news and information, the United States, through its soft power, through the use of Voice of America, has been able to broadcast airwaves which aren't subject to censorship. CCP China they don't get pro-democracy, pro-America feeds to their children, to the internet that they provide. They block what happened in 1989, Tiananmen Square massacre. A whole generation of Chinese nationals are growing up not understanding what that was and what happened in Beijing in 1989 to the Forbidden City. And so, Iran's now cutting off information via the internet. People can't even call home over there. But with regard to the airwaves, this is the way the United States has been able to broadcast. I mean, not necessarily, soft power programming, ideas, giving people a hope that would otherwise not have any. The Cubans in Miami, Radio Free Cuba, Radio Marti, pummeling Havana with airwaves so that the Cubans over there could listen and understand what the Cubans fled to. This is the soft power that we're diminishing on some level, and maybe it's not as effective as it once was. I don't know. I'm not a radio expert guy. But with regard to PBS, I just was listening to the comments of Ken Burns, the Steam documentary, who is illuminated my world with regard to his Vietnam coverage, national parks, a whole host of Americans, where are they going to get that high level of content online somewhere? They're not. They're going to have to go to YouTube and find, piecemeal clips of this and that. And, Grandpa fought in Vietnam. Where did he fight? What was it all about? They're not getting it in their school system. So Ken Burns, obviously a big, powerful voice in documentary filmmaking, making his case. I've seen wonderful pieces with regard to Wayne Dyer on down. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of the media on those stations that you're not going to get online, and obviously with the attention economy being what it is, everybody's on their phone. So maybe the government figure out a way to provide better messaging instead of creating this divisive politics along party and podcast lines, right? Where you don't know what kind of news you're getting is true or not. So I think there's some problems there. The USAID arguments in here have been very, very sound and strong, and obviously sad from a standpoint of what USAID set about to do when John F. Kennedy implemented the program in '61. He also implemented the Peace Corps. I think the United States, this is the thing that I'm most proud about our country, is that we took the helm in the free world, and we didn't take these enemies of ours that we beat to a pulp and say, hey, go figure it out, go white knuckle your rebuilding program. No, we came in and provided the form of USAID, the form of loans.
It goes back to you just started to say it, the Marshall.
Yeah, the Marshall Plan. What is that? Is that sold?
Oops, I think we lost David. But I think he made his point as always. Joe?
Yes, hi, Gary. I grew up liking NPR and PBS. Not everything, of course, but I I remember staying home on my black and white and watching Cream from Albert Hall, the Concert for George, music stuff, and the guy just previously mentioned Ken Burns, his incredible baseball documentary, inning 1, 2, 3 and getting up to the 9th inning in the present time. It was unbelievable as a baseball fan. So and NPR too, growing up with NPR and MPBS again. Dr. King was presented on there a lot. Racial history in America, things that really had to be seen. A lot of things, there's things I didn't agree with, things I agreed with, but I wanted to know. So I'm for it, and I'll say two things after this. One is the children's shows, Mr. Rogers, and God, my son loved Mr. Rogers, and Sesame Street, invaluable to children. Now, the last thing I'll say, because you have to leave soon, and this is all about federal funding of NPR, PBS. I think they should allow taxpayers, you can pick an amount, 10% of your taxes that you owe, or whatever. If your tax is like $1,000, 10% is $100, and you should be able to point where you want that $100 to go. It doesn't have to go in one place. It could go to NPR. You have to go to NPR. You have to go to PBS. You have to go to something else. Black and white movies of that's presented on PBS. I think we should fund it, but let people fund it that want to fund it. What do you think of that idea?
It's a unique idea. I think I've heard it proposed before. I don't know how it could be implemented, but it's an interesting idea. Thank you, Jules. John?
Yeah, hey, Gary. I think that pulling funding for NPR, PBS, USAID is essential. The GDP to debt ratio is now at 133%. It's only going up.
And why not cuts to the defense budget, which
Absolutely.
Would be meaningful as
That's another trillion right there.
Be meaningful as opposed to this is a minuscule amount of money. You know that.
It doesn't matter if it's minuscule or not. We can't keep spending like a drunken sailors. We've been at war for 24 years. If we don't have austerity and make cuts now, we will be in a death spiral.
All right, but when you want to be a member of Congress, so I'm going to challenge you on this as I would if you were already in
Fiscally
office.
conservative and fiscally prudent. I don't believe.
Well, how's this
has
fiscal-
uncovered $600 billion in fraudulent spending on gender engineering everywhere. How much is enough?
How is this being fiscally responsible? Are you suggesting that
This is
in other
nothing but
areas?
U.S. propaganda. If they can't turn a profit, you're out of business. It's that simple. Are we going to keep borrowing 40% of our economy? It's not a real economy.
So you would apply that to the Defense Department if they can't turn a profit? They're out of business?
100%. Lower it to $600 billion a year. We are spending
How do you anticipate?
$700 billion a month and only taking in $500 billion. It's unsustainable.
How would you anticipate? I'm helping you. I'm preparing you. If you get elected, you'll be on CNN or Fox or on someplace answering these kinds of questions. Surely, if I have the opportunity, I'll be asking you these kinds of questions. So how do you make the Defense Department profitable?
We stopped passing big, beautiful omnibus bills and spending $700 billion a month, but only taking in $500 billion. We have to stop borrowing and spending.
That's not the argument. The question is, how do these minuscule cuts really address in other words, if you triage the problem that you just so correctly articulated, how does cutting money to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting even make a drop in the ocean of overspending?
Jerry, it's called
that we're
stop
discussing?
spending money you don't have. You stop going to the layaway aisle at Walmart and buying stuff you don't have money for. We don't have money for this. We can't keep borrowing and spending. We need a law. We need change. We can't keep spending on everything. We need rescission. We need to cut spending now.
Again, future Congressman, I agree with your premise. I'm just asking, how does this
It's called
address that issue?
prioritization, Gary. It's called prioritization.
But when the
You
the prioritization,
don't you? We as a country have to live with priorities. NPR and USAID is no longer a priority in our book of business.
So the priorities are not based on what actually financially will gain us what you want to, what your goal is. The priorities are what you see as wasteful.
It's called pragmatism, Gary. We cut the borrowing, we cut the spending on things we don't need. We don't need USAID, NPR, PBS. They're done. They're gone. They're history. We are entering into a new age of fiscal conservatism because we can't keep borrowing and spending. It's not an authentic economy.
How are we entering?
We are a debt slave.
How are we entering fiscal conservatism when we are adding so much money to
We're not. The Republicans just passed the big, beautiful bill. They're a bunch of traitors. I'm going to replace the old traitors with new patriots. Vote for John Kidover and go to johnforcongress.com.
I wonder how many of your potential constituents are here, but if they are, I'm sure they were listening very carefully to your responses. Thank you, John. Elle, are you here? It shows that you're on the phone.
I'm not on the phone, but I am having a ethical here, Gary, because I wanted to come up on stage to say that I really am grieving the idea of no PBS, and certainly Sesame Street, and having beautiful memories of watching Sesame Street with my little children. And the moment when I fell in love with it which was when I listened to them singing letter B in order to keep us the letter B, letter B, letter B. That's when I fell in love with it.
Very cute. That was very cute.
I know, and it's really true, and they've been part of my heart forever. However, I guess this is not probably appropriate in this moment, but I was in the chat and just saw that this Kidover guy is on your stage. I don't know if you're aware that this is the guy who's been taping.
Yeah, I'm aware, and I know that he's been kicked off the program a million times, and he comes back on. I'm very much aware.
We are fighting really hard to get him off this app. And
Yeah, so John, if you're listening, let me just explain to you. I think it's a little rude. Each room, they make a determination in the rooms whether they want to have, what do they call it, replays, right? Replays or not. And we early on made the decision to not have replays in this room because there were a number of people who expressed to my little team that I put together when we were doing our due diligence that they do not feel comfortable participating on stage in rooms that have replays. And so therefore, we do not. And by you posting on YouTube your version of replays, you're going against their wishes and perhaps discouraging people from participating, which I know as a future congressman of these United States, you want everybody, whether they agree with you or not, to participate on the stage at the Critical Thinking Forum. So I ask you to voluntarily abide by our wishes to not, without our permission, replay this forum for that reason. Thank you.
I just want to say that. Everybody can screen record, Gary. This horse has left the barn.
I understand. I understand. I understand he
Anything
can.
I say can be recorded.
I understand that he can do it, and I understand that he has the right to do it. I am asking him to understand why we do not do replays and ask him to be cognizant of the concerns of those who motivate us to not allow replays. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, Gary, there's no anonymity on the internet anymore.
I understand that. I understand that.
I wish we were all living in the 18th century.
I understand that, but there are people who feel, unlike you and me, uncomfortable being up front like this on the internet. They don't want clips to be taken. Like I told a joke earlier, somebody could take that joke and put it as a clip and say, this is where he is for, out of context. So people feel uncomfortable. So I'm asking him as a fellow Clubhouse chatter to be cognizant of the feelings as I am, and the reason why I do not allow replays to not do it. You know, when you allow replays, the people are aware and that they are being recorded. Fine. And then they decide that they want to or they don't want to. If I'm advertising that we're not recording and then somebody else is recording and playing it, that's not fair to those individuals.
Well, had I not seen that I was up next and then suddenly saw him, I was shocked that he was on your stage, so I would not have been comfortable sharing a stage with him. I just didn't know whether you were aware.
Yeah, I'm aware. Thank you, Al. Meryl.
A couple of people have already expressed quite well how I feel. Talking about USAID, very quickly, from the time that I was young, it was instilled in me, instilled in my family, instilled in our close family friends, that we are in the United States, we're America, and we do things. We do help starving people. We're supposed to do it here, but we also do it in other countries. And the words humanitarian aid has become a very dirty, nasty word lately. USAID had 83% of its programs cut. One of the gentlemen that was here reminded us that most of the food comes from farmers here. It's not like we're losing money when we do it. And I should point out, when they canceled contracts, that meant people weren't getting food, people weren't getting medicine. And I don't know if you've ever known anybody that's worked in an area where they've seen starving children, but it costs us pennies to give medicine and food.
And create goodwill in the process.
That's right. So
let me channel the childhood of Meryl, and I could see you sitting at the table and wanting to leave the table before you finish your vegetables, and your mother says to you, or probably your father, Meryl, there are people starving in China.
You bet.
See, I know how you were groomed to be compassionate, Meryl.
And
shame on your parents.
We couldn't go out on Halloween unless we were collecting for UNICEF. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah. See, because you and I are of the same generation and the same kind of household. Thank you, Meryl. Dominic Stan, and then I think, David, you spoke, but you got cut off, so we'll give you a chance to finish what you were saying.
Okay.
Dominic, Stan, and
I'll be
David.
quick, because I know you gotta go. There's so many things to talk about. I'm gonna go with AID. The Marine who spoke, I thought, spoke quite informatively about the utility of USAID. And he said a couple of times, you know, we should reform it and not eliminate it. And I think that hits the nail on the head. It became an organization that seemed to be beyond reform. And unfortunately, it had been allowed to operate quasi-independently. I have members of the intelligence community who operated within AID. It was a foreign policy. It was never humanitarian aid. It was simply being used as a tool of foreign policy, and it had lost much of its authenticity. At least that's the argument that was made to me. So, and I take my family members. I don't think they're going to lie to me about it. But so, to the extent that the purpose is valid, I would support a reinvigorated effort to recreate an institution like USAID. As far as, you know what, I'm going to leave it there because you're in a hurry. Thank you. Sorry.
Talking about
Thank
USAID.
you, Dominic, Stan, and then David again for a completion of his previous discussion. Stan?
Hey, Gary. So just some general themes. I thought the Marine did an excellent job describing USAID. And I think that they have thousands of different programs that are constantly getting modified. I think that the Doge folks did us a disservice by lying about some of the programs. Clearly, there are some programs, and not everybody's going to understand the details about it, but we all think because of Google or because we saw something on TikTok that we are experts on it, and that's just naive. But that kind of moves on to the problem with NPR and PBS. Clearly, they have a different viewpoint that they share out there. Sometimes they bring educated topics, like the fact that we've now learned that people are born with their brains and they can actually be born with male genitalias, but with thinking that they are females. And that is offensive to some people, that the newer science becomes something that they don't want to hear. And if they hear that on NPR, then all of a sudden there's a bias because they're talking about science that people don't want to believe. So but the downside is by defunding NPR and PBS, what we're going to see is that in popular cities, as Seattle was mentioned earlier, or where I live, there's going to be plenty of local people that donate, and it's going to stay on the air. But in rural America, where people don't have as many choices, they're going to end up taking the hit. And maybe it's going to be positive for those people like that are up for office, because they'll have a less smart electorate voting, and they won't actually know all the details about things. So I guess you could argue that if you are a Republican running for Congress and you want stupid electors, it's great that NPR is getting defunded for your rural voters. And likewise, you wouldn't want people to find out about the good programs that USAID is doing, because NPR might be able to tell people about that, and we want to defund that. And earlier, someone mentioned we should be spending money on rural broadband. Biden had a $42 billion program on rural broadband to bring rural broadband, in other words, high-speed internet to people that live in rural America. But I believe that has been put on hold. And the downside to Elon's Starlink product is that the more density of people using Starlink in an area, the slower it gets. So when it was reviewed, the government and others decided it wasn't good enough for rural broadband because of the fact that it degraded with more users. So with that, I've been really quick, but Gary, again, thank you for having me, Drew.
Thank you, Stan. David, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I don't know where I got cut off, Gary. I think I inadvertently exited the stage when I thought I was talking. I didn't have my headset, but I was talking about the legacy of our nation's great wealth, and the way that philanthropists, even though he was a robber baron like Andrew Carnegie, who funded the library system in this country, spent millions of dollars because he believed that you needed to provide resources to the poorest of the poor to pick up. And this is well before our educational system took off the way that it did. I talked a little bit about
What if it was my mom?
Kennedy and
I think my mom knows she's on my podcast.
Marshall Plan, the Cold War. The Cold War, many argue, was won on the backs of soft power. Creating the environment that this is the better way to live in this world, to have freedoms, to have a prosperity, to work hard for something and not have it necessarily tacked to death or controlled by an oligarch or a dictator. I think these are important values, albeit as imperfect as they are, that we need to continue to message around the world. And with regard to the internet, and every internet I know today, every program that's out there is paywalls. It's apps that you have to buy now or download. So everything's being segmented again. You want this program, you got to pay for that. So at the end of the day, you're paying as much for the internet as you are cable. I cited, I don't know if I got cut off, but I was citing Ken Burns, and I was citing the wonderful content that this guy's produced that's putting out there on the public airwaves, the Vietnam War, our national parks, repositories of history and knowledge that I don't think our school systems are delivering. And so these public airwaves, how much is it costing? Is it, to Merrill's point, is it peanuts? Is it what is the bottom line here to have these great resources out there working on behalf of all of us? And I get it. I get the whole bipartisanship and the political agendas that they're saying. But with USAID, I think it's an American message. It's not a Republican or Democrat or MAGA message. It's, your people are poor. We're going to help you save them. We're going to help you vaccinate them. We're going to help you heal them. And we're going to do that with great people. How many more Americans do we want plying their trades in the free market, working in Wall Street or internet companies? These are Americans that are out there on the front lines giving back to the world and taking their education and knowledge and promoting the best of this country. And then we're just firing everybody. And so I think there's something to be said about that isn't being talked about as well. And so I think as long as America wants to continue to fight the Russians, CCP China and what they're doing. I mentioned the fact that the internet is controlled over there. These dictators know how to control information. With airwaves, it's much more difficult to stop airwaves that are coming across the skies. And I think Voice of America was front and center of that. Was it too left or liberal? Who knows? But I'm saying, why don't the Republicans figure out content and create content that promotes a lot of what they're talking about? So instead of just throwing it all out the window, they're smart people. Why can't we create some content that sort of has 50-50? I don't see. This is the thing, Gary. I don't know exactly what it is they're attacking, if it makes sense or not. If it's just a matter of line item and getting out of the budget, so we could put the money elsewhere for our own projects, our own special interests. So these are the talking points that are very difficult to parse. And again, I think if I were to choose, I would have said maybe diminish NPR, PBS, but not USAID, because I think globally that's way more important for the mission and the message of the United States as a country.
Thank you, David. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time, so until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow. For the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
Association of Blacks and Public Administration. So that is
Not happy.
in the municipalities. And so we would have conferences and do things in different cities all over the country. hosted a public forum for some black judges and some other officers, elected officers. This particular year, they were running as Republicans, and we wanted to know why. We knew they were Democrats, but most of them had gone to Republican. And what they said essentially was during the local elections, when they're not running parallel with the presidential election, that Democrats didn't vote. And so in order for them to win, they needed to put the R in front of their name. Because the Republicans came out and the Democrats didn't during the local election, which was really sad to hear, but that's what they had to do to have a fighting chance to win. So
I can see that.
Definition of a rhino. That's the definition of a rhino, right?
Republican in name only, yeah. I can see that. Only thing is, like, even in our, like, if you go to Alpharetta or, I'm just trying to think of a very, very rich enclave, it's still run by niggas. They're gonna have, like, they keep saying they're gonna gentrify Atlanta. I just don't know how they're gonna do it.
Raise rent. Raise the rent up. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's getting high now, but I know it's, people have been talking about it before, and they just need to continue to do that, and they'll price people out.
What, in Atlanta?
Yeah, I think so. Just because I know
You
that a
can't
lot of
price
people
the
are still
people out.
holding.
But that's the thing about Atlanta. Every time they've done that, they've done it several times. I've been here for 20 years. They've tried to price people out of every neighborhood, and black people, North Decatur is the most recent victim. They tried to price niggas out of there, and the niggas, it's always going to be somebody with the money to do it here. And as soon as one come, it's just like clockwork. The rest just start coming through. And I guess it's because they built the belt line, so you have some white people coming, but the only white people that are going to come here, it's just going to make the city way more democratic because it's so black and it's so...
Tolerating my obnoxious...
It's been like that for so long. Only white people that are going to move here feel comfortable.
I cooked a lot of bread.
Democratic white people that are used to being around and feel more comfortable around black people. So I think the thing that they're trying to do with Atlanta, if they're trying to make it go back red, it's not. They're actually doing the opposite.
I can't argue. I'm not there. I mean, I've only been there a couple times, but yeah, I mean,